The neon glow of Centauri Station's lower markets cast purple shadows across Celine Voss's silver skin as she pressed herself against the cold metal wall. The familiar weight of her phase blade felt reassuring against her hip, but she knew it wouldn't be enough, not against the dozen neural-linked hunters currently converging on her position. 20 years as the galaxy's most effective assassin, and she'd never faced odds quite like this. The bounty on her head had reached astronomical levels after her last job, when she discovered the truth about her employers and turned against them. Now, the syndicate wanted her eliminated before she could expose their operations. The sound of boots on metal grating echoed through the narrow corridor. Celine held her breath, her enhanced hearing picking up the subtle whir of targeting systems activating. They were close, too close. A maintenance hatch creaked open beside her. Before Celine could draw her blade, a hand reached out and pulled her inside. She spun, ready to strike, only to find herself face to face with a human male who quickly pressed a finger to his lips. "Unless you want to be vacuum-dried bounty hunter bait, stay quiet," he whispered, his green eyes twinkling with an inappropriate amount of amusement given the situation. Celine studied him in the dim light of the maintenance tunnel. He wore a oil-stained jumpsuit with the name Ryan stitched across the chest, and his dark hair was tied back in a messy knot. He didn't look like a threat, which usually meant someone was especially dangerous. "Why help me?" she demanded in a whisper, her blade still half-drawn. Ryan shrugged, checking a battered datapad. "Because those neural hunters out there are bad for business. They tend to shoot first and check credentials never. Also," he grinned, "I have a terrible habit of doing the exact opposite of what common sense suggests." Before Celine could respond, heavy footsteps passed by their hiding spot. She tensed, but the maintenance hatch's stealth shielding held. The hunters moved on, their neural trackers apparently confused by the station's dense power signatures. "My ship's 3 levels down," Ryan said, already moving deeper into the maintenance tunnel. "You're welcome to hitch a ride, unless you've got a better plan." Celine didn't. Her own escape route had been compromised, her contact murdered. This human was either her salvation or leading her into a trap. But she'd survived this long by trusting her instincts, and something about his casual demeanor felt genuine. "If you betray me," she said, following him through the tunnel, "your death will be creative and prolonged." Ryan chuckled. "Noted. Though I should warn you, my ship's got character." Character turned out to be a generous description for the battered Meridian-class freighter that sat in a dimly lit private dock. Its hull was a patchwork of repairs, and one of its stabilizers looked held together by little more than hope and welding tape. "Please tell me this isn't your ship," Celine said, staring at the vessel with growing concern. "This is the Starcatcher," Ryan said proudly, pressing his palm to the entry scanner. "She's faster than she looks." The ship's ramp lowered with a concerning groan. As they hurried aboard, Celine's enhanced senses picked up the sound of boots on metal. The hunters had managed to track them. "We've got company," she warned, drawing her phase blade. The weapon hummed to life, its edge glowing with deadly energy. Ryan was already in the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls. "Hang on to something. This takeoff's gonna be interesting." The Starcatcher's engines roared to life just as the first hunter appeared in the doorway. Celine deflected 2 shots with her blade before Ryan yanked the ship upward, sending them both stumbling. The sudden movement saved their lives as a barrage of plasma fire scorched the space they'd occupied seconds before. "Define interesting," Celine shouted over the screaming engines. "You know, the kind where we either pull off something amazing or die spectacularly." The ship burst from the dock like a wounded animal, alarms blaring as Ryan pushed it well beyond what its safety systems recommended. Behind them, 3 sleek hunter vessels gave chase, their weapons charging. Celine strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat, her silver skin reflecting the chaos of warning lights across the cockpit. "You do have a plan, right?" "Working on it." Ryan yanked the controls hard right, weaving between cargo containers and station structures. How do you feel about impossible odds? They're only impossible if you die, she replied, bringing up the weapon systems. To her surprise, the targeting computer was state-of-the-art, a stark contrast to the ship's exterior. That's the spirit. Ryan's grin was infectious as he sent them into a spin that would have made a professional pilot hesitate. Pick your shots carefully, we've only got enough power for a few good hits. Celine did what she did best. Her first shot disabled the lead pursuer's primary weapons. Her second blew out the second ship's engines. The third hunter broke off rather than face similar treatment. As they burst free of the station's gravity well, Ryan let out a whoop of triumph. See? Character counts for something. Celine allowed herself a small smile. The ship's not bad either. Ryan laughed, plotting a course away from Centauri space. Was that a joke? From the galaxy's deadliest assassin? I'm honored. Don't be. I might still kill you. Fair enough. But maybe wait until after we've cleared the sector? I'd hate for my death to be interrupted by those hunters catching up. As the Starcatcher jumped to hyperspace, Celine found herself wondering what sort of trouble she'd gotten herself into by trusting this oddly cheerful human. But for the first time in years, she felt something unexpected: hope. The Starcatcher drifted through the crimson nebula of the Scarlet Expanse, its systems powered down to avoid detection. In the dim emergency lighting of the ship's common area, Celine watched Ryan work on a damaged circuit board, his fingers moving with surprising precision for someone who seemed so casual about everything else. You're not just a mechanic, she stated, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for the past hour. Ryan didn't look up from his work, but a slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. What gave it away? My charming personality or my excellent taste in ships? The targeting system on this vessel is military grade. The engine modifications are beyond anything a civilian mechanic could access. And you handled those neural hunters like you'd done it before. Perceptive, he said, setting down his tools. But then again, you wouldn't have survived this long if you weren't. He leaned back, finally meeting her gaze. Former special operations, if you're curious. I specialized in extraction and rescue missions before. Well, let's just say the military and I had a difference of opinion about certain ethical matters. Celine's silver skin shimmed slightly in the low light, a sign of heightened alertness among her species. You're a deserter. I prefer independently principled, Ryan replied, reaching for a hydrospanner. Speaking of principles, want to tell me why the Syndicate wants you dead badly enough to send neural hunters? Celine tensed, her hand instinctively moving toward her phase blade. Ryan noticed but continued working as if he hadn't just asked about one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the galaxy. Their business is murder, she finally said. But even assassins have lines they won't cross. The Syndicate's latest operation, they're targeting children. Specifically, children with genetic markers for psychic abilities. Ryan's hands stilled. Why? They're building an army. One that can't be stopped by conventional defenses. I discovered their facility on Nexus Prime. Hundreds of children, their minds being warped into weapons. Her voice hardened. I was supposed to eliminate a witness, a doctor who'd discovered their plan. Instead, I helped her escape and destroyed their research facility. And now they want to tie up loose ends, Ryan said, understanding dawning in his eyes. Where's the doctor now? Safe. But I have proof of what they're doing, proof that could bring down their entire organization. That's why they want me dead. Before Ryan could respond, the ship's proximity alarm blared to life. They both rushed to the cockpit, where the scanners showed 3 ships emerging from hyperspace. Neural hunters? Celine asked, strapping into the co-pilot's seat. Ryan shook his head, his expression grim. Worse. Syndicate enforcers. Those ships are Phantom-class stealth vessels. They shouldn't have been able to track us through the nebula unless... His eyes widened. Unless they had help from the inside. Someone at the station must have planted a quantum tracker on the ship. Celine's blade hummed to life. We need to find it. No time, Ryan said, powering up the engines. Those ships will tear us apart before we can locate it. I've got a better idea. He grinned, but this time there was a dangerous edge to it. Ever hear of the Maelstrom? Celine stared at him. The temporal storm that destroyed an entire fleet? The one that's explicitly marked as a no-fly zone by every navigation system in the galaxy? That's the one. You're insane. Probably. But the Phantom ships are faster than us in open space. In the Maelstrom, though? All that fancy stealth tech will just make them more vulnerable to the temporal distortions. The first volley of shots from the pursuing vessels sizzled past the Starcatcher's hull. Celine looked at the swirling vortex of the Maelstrom looming ahead of them on the view screen, then at Ryan's determined face. If we die, she said, I'm killing you. Ryan laughed as he pushed the ship toward the massive storm. I'd expect nothing less. The Starcatcher plunged into the Maelstrom, and reality itself seemed to twist around them. Colors that shouldn't exist painted the cockpit in impossible patterns as temporal energy crackled across the hull. Behind them, the Syndicate ships followed, their superior engines closing the gap. Hold on. Ryan shouted, sending them into a spiral that would have been suicidal in normal space. But here, in the Maelstrom, the laws of physics were more like polite suggestions. A temporal wave caught one of the pursuing ships, aging its hull 1,000 years in an instant. The vessel crumbled into dust. Another ship got caught in a time eddy, its crew experiencing decades in seconds. We can't stay in here long, Ryan warned, his knuckles white on the controls. The shielding won't hold. Celine watched in fascination as her own silver skin rippled with temporal energy, showing her glimpses of both her past and possible futures. In one flash, she saw herself and Ryan standing together under an alien sun, her blade retired, his easy smile unchanged. In another, she saw only darkness. There. Ryan pointed to a gap in the temporal storms. That's our way out. The Starcatcher's engines screamed in protest as he pushed them toward the escape route. The last Syndicate ship tried to follow but got caught in a temporal crosscurrent. Celine caught a glimpse of its crew aging backward into infants before the vessel vanished entirely. They burst free of the Maelstrom, the ship groaning from the strain. Emergency alerts flashed across every console, but they were alive, and more importantly, they were alone. Ryan slumped in his seat, exhaling slowly. See? Nothing to it. Celine realized she was gripping her armrests hard enough to leave dents. You, she said carefully, are either the most brilliant or the most foolish human I've ever met. Why not both? He checked the ship's systems, his expression growing more serious. We lost the quantum tracker in the temporal storm, but we've also lost our long-range communications and half our power reserves. We need to make repairs. Where? I know a place. Small mining colony called Haven's End. The owner there owes me a favor, several, actually. He plotted the course, then turned to her. You know, for someone who threatened to kill me multiple times, you trusted me pretty quickly back there. Celine was quiet for a moment, considering. In my experience, trust isn't about time. It's about moments that matter. You've had 3 chances to betray me. Instead, you risked your life. That means something. Ryan said, smiling softly. Coming from you, I'll take that as high praise. As the Starcatcher limped toward Haven's End, Celine found herself studying her unlikely companion. She'd spent years learning to read people, to spot lies and detect betrayal. But Ryan Cole was something new, a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure she wanted to. Haven's End lived up to its name, barely. The mining colony was carved into the face of an asteroid, its external lights flickering like dying stars against the void. Ancient mining rigs jutted from the rocky surface like skeletal fingers, their frames encrusted with ice and mineral deposits. "Home sweet home," Ryan said as he guided the Starcatcher toward a private docking bay. "Well, one of them anyway." "You have interesting taste in sanctuaries," Celine observed, noting the heavy defensive turrets hidden among the mining equipment. This wasn't just a colony, it was a fortress. The best hiding places are the ones nobody looks at twice. Ryan activated the landing sequence, then turned to her with an unusually serious expression. "Listen, the owner here, Nikolai, he's complicated. Let me do the talking." Celine raised an eyebrow. "Complicated how?" "Let's just say he makes your normal line of work look like children's entertainment." The docking bay doors ground open with the reluctance of ancient machinery. Ryan landed the Starcatcher with more care than usual, conscious of the ship's damaged systems. As the engines powered down, Celine's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of multiple footsteps approaching. "We have a welcoming committee," she warned. Ryan nodded, standing. "Stay close, but please don't stab anyone unless I give the signal." "And what's the signal?" "Me screaming in terror, probably." The ship's ramp lowered to reveal 6 heavily armed guards led by a mountain of a man. His cybernetic eye glowed red in the dim light, scanning them both as they descended. "Ryan Cole," the man rumbled, his accent thick with old Earth Russian. "You have nerve, coming here after what happened on Europa." Ryan spread his arms in a gesture of innocence. "Come on, Nikolai. That was 3 years ago, and I did send you a very nice apology basket. You sent me a bomb. A very small bomb. And it was gift-wrapped." Nikolai's organic eye narrowed, then he burst into thunderous laughter. "Still same foolish boy." He embraced Ryan in a bone-crushing hug before turning his attention to Celine. His cybernetic eye whirred as it analyzed her. "And who is this silver ghost you bring to my home?" "A friend," Ryan said quickly. "Who needs our help with repairs and discretion." "Friend?" Nikolai studied Celine more closely. "No. Professional. I know killers' eyes when I see them. Like looking in mirror." He grinned, revealing gold-plated teeth. "Come. We talk business inside." They followed Nikolai through winding corridors carved from the asteroid's rock, eventually emerging into a vast chamber that served as both office and trophy room. Weapons and artifacts from across the galaxy lined the walls, each telling its own story of violence and acquisition. "Drink?" Nikolai offered, pulling out a bottle of something that glowed faintly blue. "We need to discuss," Ryan started, but Nikolai cut him off with a wave. "First drink, then talk. Is tradition." The liquid burned like frozen fire going down. Celine's enhanced metabolism processed it instantly, but she saw Ryan struggling not to cough. "Now," Nikolai said, settling behind his desk, "tell me why most expensive assassin in Galaxy is on your ship, boy. And why Syndicate puts out alert offering planets worth of credits for her capture." Celine tensed, but Ryan stepped forward. "It's complicated, old friend. But she's fighting something worse than her usual targets. Something that threatens everyone, even you." Nikolai's cybernetic eye pulsed. "Children. They take children, yes. Turn them into weapons." At their surprised looks, he shrugged. "I hear things. Have ears everywhere, even in Syndicate." "Then you know why we need your help," Ryan pressed. "Help is dangerous word, especially now." Nikolai stood, walking to a window that overlooked the mining operation below. "Syndicate has new allies. Powerful ones. They offer much money to anyone who helps them. And much pain to those who don't. Since when does Nikolai the Immortal fear the Syndicate? Ryan asked. The big man turned, his expression grave. Since they make deal with the Void. Celine felt her blood freeze. The Void was more than just a criminal organization, they were something approaching a cult, dedicated to pushing the boundaries of human modification and enhancement. Their experiments were legendary for their brutality and success rate of exactly 0. They're working together, she asked, breaking her silence. The Syndicate and the Void? Nikolai nodded. Syndicate provides children with gift. Void provides methods. Together, they build army that cannot be stopped. Cannot be saved. He fixed his gaze on Ryan. This is why you came, yes? For information? Actually, we came for repairs, Ryan said. The information is a bonus. Repairs I can give. Information. Nikolai pressed a button on his desk, and a holographic display sprang to life, showing a massive facility buried beneath an ocean. This is where they take them. Planet called Tartarus. Very dramatic, yes? Celine studied the display. Those defenses are impressive. Is not defenses you should worry about. Nikolai's voice was grim. Is what happens inside. They break children down, rebuild them. Most die. Those who live, better if they didn't. Ryan's usual smile was gone, replaced by something harder. We need to stop them. You need army, Nikolai countered. No, Celine said, her voice quiet but firm. We need a way in. One person, the right person, in the right place. Nikolai laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think you can kill your way through this? Even you are not that good. I'm not planning to kill anyone, she replied. I'm planning to save them. The big man studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Perhaps you are not just killer after all. He turned to Ryan. Your ship will be repaired by morning. What you do with information is your choice. But remember, some choices, once made, cannot be unmade. Later, in the privacy of the Starcatcher's common room, Ryan found Celine studying the holographic plans Nikolai had given them. You're really going to do this, aren't you? He asked, sitting across from her. I have to. Those children. She paused, collecting herself. I was trained to be a weapon too, once. But I had a choice. They don't. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Well, I guess we better start planning then. She looked up sharply. We? Partner, if you think I'm letting you storm a fortress of evil scientists and criminal masterminds alone, you really don't know me very well yet. This isn't your fight. Maybe not. He smiled, but it was different from his usual grin, softer, more genuine. But it's the right fight. And sometimes that's all that matters. Celine felt something shift inside her, like a wall crumbling. She'd spent so long keeping people at arm's length, seeing them as either targets or threats. But Ryan saw her as something else. Something more than just a weapon. You'll probably die, she warned. Probably, he agreed cheerfully. But what a story it'll make if we don't. Tartarus lived up to its mythological namesake. The planet's endless ocean churned with massive waves under perpetual storm clouds, lightning illuminating the darkness in brief, violent flashes. The Starcatcher hung in high orbit, hidden behind one of the planet's 3 moons as Ryan and Celine made their final preparations. Remember, Celine said, checking her equipment one last time, once we're inside, we'll have exactly 47 minutes before the facility's quantum scanners reset. If we're not out by then, we'll be trapped inside an underwater fortress full of psychic children and mad scientists. Ryan adjusted the settings on his plasma rifle. Just another Tuesday, really. Celine paused in her preparations to study him. Gone was the carefree mechanic she'd first met. In his place stood a soldier, his movements precise and practiced. Yet somehow, he'd maintained that glint of humor in his eyes. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked suddenly. Ryan looked up, surprised by the question. "Would you believe me if I said it was for the adventure?" "No." He sighed, setting down his weapon. "Before I left Special Operations, I led a mission to what we thought was a pirate stronghold. Turned out to be a research facility, not unlike this one. We weren't prepared for what we found inside. I was the only one who made it out." His voice grew quiet. "I swore I'd never walk away from something like that again." Celine reached out, hesitating for just a moment before placing her hand on his arm. The gesture felt foreign to her, but somehow right. "We won't fail this time." Ryan covered her hand with his, and for a moment they stood in silence, drawing strength from each other's presence. Then the ship's proximity alert chimed, signaling their approach to the drop point. The descent to Tartarus's surface was a controlled fall through howling winds and sheets of rain. Their stealth pod, borrowed from Nikolai's impressive collection, cut through the atmosphere like a knife, its heat shields glowing as they plummeted toward the dark waters below. "Remember," Ryan said as they approached the surface, "we've got one shot at this. The facility's defense grid will detect any vessel larger than a pod, and even this thing won't stay hidden for long once we're underwater." Celine nodded, her silver skin reflecting the pod's instrument lights. "Then let's not waste time." They hit the water at precisely the right angle, the pod's smart metal hull adapting instantly to underwater navigation. Below them, barely visible through the murky depths, loomed the massive shape of the Tartarus facility. "Security patrol on approach," Ryan warned, checking the sensors. "Holding position." They waited in tense silence as a group of automated drones swept past their location. Celine's enhanced vision could make out their sleek, predatory forms cutting through the water with lethal grace. "Clear," she whispered, and Ryan guided them toward their entry point, a maintenance airlock that Nikolai's intel suggested would be minimally guarded. The docking procedure was delicate, requiring perfect timing between the facility's shield fluctuations. One mistake would trigger the defense grid and end their mission before it began. Ryan's hands moved over the controls with surgical precision, and Celine found herself holding her breath. With a soft thud and a hiss of equalizing pressure, they were in. "Ladies first," Ryan said, gesturing to the airlock with an exaggerated bow. "Your humor will get you killed one day," Celine replied, but there was no bite in her words. They moved through the facility like ghosts, their footsteps silent on the metal floors. Celine's enhanced senses guided them past security patrols, while Ryan's military training helped them avoid the more sophisticated detection systems. They were halfway to the central containment area when they heard it, a child's scream, echoing through the corridors with unnatural resonance. Celine froze, her silver skin rippling with tension. "That's not normal," Ryan muttered, checking their surroundings. "No," Celine agreed. "That's what a psychic awakening sounds like when it's forced." Her voice hardened. "They're starting the procedures." They quickened their pace, following the sound through the labyrinthine facility. The screams grew louder, joined by others, a chorus of pain that made Ryan's jaw clench and Celine's hand tighten on her phase blade. They found the source in a vast chamber filled with holding cells. Each transparent pod contained a child, their small forms connected to a web of machinery that pulsed with sickly green energy. Scientists in white coats moved between the pods, making adjustments and taking notes with clinical detachment. 23 children, Celine counted, her enhanced vision scanning the room. Plus 12 guards and 8 researchers. "And one very big problem," Ryan added, pointing to a figure who had just entered the chamber. The man was tall and painfully thin, his body more machine than flesh. Tubes and cables sprouted from his skull, connecting to a floating array of surgical instruments that orbited him like mechanical planets. "Director Vane," Celine breathed. The Void's chief researcher. I'm guessing he's not the type to surrender peacefully? No. He believes suffering is the key to evolution. That pain unlocks humanity's true potential. Ryan checked his weapon. Then I guess we do this the hard way. Wait, Celine caught his arm. Look. The children in the pods had gone quiet, but something was wrong. The machinery monitoring them was showing irregular patterns, and the air seemed to shimmer with unseen energy. They're connecting, Celine realized. The procedures, they're not just awakening their abilities, they're linking them together. Creating a network. Is that bad? As if in answer, one of the researchers suddenly clutched his head and screamed. Blood trickled from his nose as he collapsed. Around the chamber, others began to fall, their minds crushed by an invisible force. We need to move, Celine said urgently. Now. But before they could act, Director Vane's voice cut through the chaos. Fascinating, isn't it? He turned, looking directly at their hiding spot. The power of shared pain. Please, come out. I'd so love to add you to our experiment. Celine and Ryan exchanged glances. The mission had just become significantly more complicated, but in that brief look, they shared a silent understanding. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Ready? Ryan asked, his usual smile replaced by grim determination. Celine's phase blade hummed to life. Always. The chamber erupted into chaos as Celine and Ryan emerged from cover. Director Vane's augmented body whirred and clicked, his surgical instruments spinning into attack formation like a swarm of metal wasps. Magnificent, he breathed, studying Celine with clinical fascination. A Thalarian assassin. Your kind's neural architecture is truly remarkable. I look forward to studying it in detail. I have a better idea, Celine replied, her blade cutting through the air in a silver arc. How about you surrender, and I don't take apart your precious machines piece by piece? Vane smiled, revealing teeth that had been replaced with chrome implants. You misunderstand. This isn't a confrontation, it's a demonstration. He pressed a button on his wrist, and the pods containing the children began to pulse with intense energy. The air itself seemed to vibrate as the children's psychic abilities manifested. Tools and equipment started floating, suspended by invisible force. The remaining guards clutched their heads, blood trickling from their noses as their minds were crushed by the combined psychic assault. The future of humanity, Vane declared, spreading his mechanical arms wide. A hive mind of unprecedented power, guided by superior intellect. My intellect. More like a monster's ambition, Ryan said, his plasma rifle trained on the director. Those are children, not weapons. They are the next step in evolution. Vane's voice rose with fanatical intensity. And you will be their first real test. The psychic energy in the room intensified, focusing on Celine and Ryan. The pressure was immense, like being crushed from all sides by an invisible vice. Ryan stumbled, his rifle clattering to the floor. But Celine stood firm, her silver skin rippling as she fought against the psychic assault. You forgot something, she gritted out, taking a step forward. Oh? Vane looked amused. And what's that? Thalarians aren't just known for their neural architecture. Another step. We're also naturally resistant to psychic manipulation. It's why we made such good assassins. One more step. And right now, I'm not the one you should be worried about. Vane's augmented eyes widened as he realized his mistake. While focusing on Celine, he'd forgotten about Ryan, who had managed to reach the central control console. Hey, Director, Ryan called out, his fingers flying over the controls. Ever wonder what happens when you reverse the flow of a psychic network? The energy in the room shifted suddenly, violently. Instead of projecting outward, the combined psychic force turned inward, focusing on its controller. Vane screamed as his own creation turned against him, his mechanical implant sparking and failing under the assault. "No," he howled. "The children are mine. The power is mine." "They were never yours," Celine said, her blade flashing as she severed the cables connecting Vane to his instruments. "They were always their own people. You just forgot they could choose." The psychic pressure subsided as the children, freed from Vane's control, began to wake. The pods opened one by one, releasing their young occupants into a world suddenly full of possibilities. Ryan rushed to help the disoriented children while Celine secured Vane, who lay twitching and broken among his ruined machines. "The authorities will be here soon," Ryan said, returning to her side. Nikolai's message got through. "The facility's location has been broadcast across every major channel in the sector. No one can cover this up now." Celine nodded, watching as the children huddled together, supporting each other in their first moments of freedom. "They'll need help. Training. Someone to show them how to use their abilities safely." "Someone like you?" Ryan asked softly. She turned to him, surprised. "I'm an assassin, not a teacher." "You're whatever you choose to be." He stepped closer, his voice gentle. "That's what this was all about, wasn't it? Choice. The freedom to decide who you are, not who others want you to be." Celine looked at her blade, then at the children. For so long, she'd defined herself by her skills as a killer. But maybe there was another path. "We could do it together," she said finally, meeting Ryan's gaze. "If you're willing to trade adventures for teaching." His smile lit up his entire face. "Who says we can't do both?" As rescue ships began arriving, their lights piercing the dark waters around the facility, Celine felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose beyond survival. The children would need protection, guidance, and understanding. They would need someone who understood what it meant to be turned into a weapon, and how to turn that weapon into a tool for good. "You know," Ryan said as they watched the evacuation begin, "for someone who threatened to kill me when we first met, you turned out to be pretty decent company." Celine allowed herself a small smile. "Don't push your luck, human." But she reached for his hand anyway, their fingers intertwining as they faced their new future together. Above them, through the facility's transparent dome, the storm clouds of Tartarus began to part, revealing the first rays of dawn breaking through the darkness. The galaxy's deadliest assassin had found something she never expected, not just a partner or a purpose, but a chance to heal old wounds by preventing new ones. And as she stood there, silver skin reflecting the growing light, Celine realized that sometimes the greatest transformations come not from changing who you are, but from finally accepting who you could be. "Ready for our next adventure?" Ryan asked, squeezing her hand. Celine looked at him, at the children they'd saved, and at the future stretching out before them. "Always."